Hello, everybody. I'm Professor Alexander. This is Human Sexuality or Human 10. Today, we're going to be talking about Chapter 6, which is Sexuality in Childhood and Adolescence. Now, again, I want to remind you that we're going to come across charts, pictures. Feel free to pause the video, take some notes so you can take in that information. As I'm talking, you should be writing because, as we know, the more notes you take, the better you can retain some of the information. Now, so chapter 6 is sexuality in childhood and adolescence. From the moment we are born, we are rich in sexual and erotic potential, which begins to take shape in our sexual curiosity and experimentation in childhood. As children, we are only partly formed, but the world around us helps shapes our sexuality. The main topics are infancy and childhood, ages 0 to 11, sexuality in adolescence, age 12 to 19, and sexuality education. So again, in this chapter, we're going to discuss the innate and the learned aspects of sexuality from infancy through adolescence. We examine both the physical development and the psychosocial development, which involves the psychological aspects of sexuality. So, psychosexual development. This pretty much pertains to and involves the psychological aspects of sexuality, the things that happen in the mind that are connected to the mind and the body, right? So our understanding of infant sexuality is based on observation, okay, and things that we internalize. It is obvious that when we are young babies, babies derive sensual pleasure from stroking, cuddling, bathing, and other tactile stimulation. Ernest Bornemann, a researcher of children's sexuality in the 1950s, suggested that the first phase of sexual development be called the cutaneous phase. This is derived from the Greek word kaitos, or skin. During this period, an infant's skin can be considered a single erogenous zone. The young child's healthy psychosexual development lays the foundation for further stages of growth. Psychosexual maturity, including the ability to love, begins to develop since we're young in infancy. So when babies are lovingly touched all over their body, which appear to be designed to attract the caresses of their elders, right? That's why you notice our older aunts and uncles and grandparents are always, pinching our cheeks and stroking young toddlers, right? Rubbing our backs. Infants and young children communicate by smiling, gesturing, crying, so on and so forth. Before they understand the language, they learn to interpret movements, facial expressions, body language, and the tone of voice. Humans' earliest lessons are conveyed in these ways. Infants begin to learn how they should feel about their bodies. For example, if a parent frowns, makes a sad face, speaks sharply, or slaps an exploring hand, the infant quickly learns that a particular activity, such as touching their own genitals, for example, is wrong. The infant may or may not continue the activity, but if he or she does, it will be in secret, probably accompanied by feelings of guilt and shame. Infants also learn about the gender role they are expected to fulfill. Baby girls are often handled more gently than baby boys. Baby girls are dressed up more. They're given soft, cuddly dolls to play with, while baby boys, in contrast, are expected to be rough and tough. This gender role learning is reinforced as a child grows older. So when we talk about infancy, infants can often be observed discovering the pleasure of genital stimulation soon after they are born. However, the body actually begins its first sexual response even earlier, right? In the utero, when sonograms have shown that boys have erections, this begins a pattern of erections that will occur throughout their lives. Signs of sexual arousal in girls, though less easily detected, begin soon after birth, include vaginal lubrication, genital swelling. In some cases, both male and female infants have been observed experiencing what appears to be an orgasm. Obviously, an infant is unable to differentiate sexual pleasure from other types of enjoyment. So viewing these as sexual responses are adult interpretations of these normal reflexes and do not necessarily signify the infant's desire or interest. What it does reveal is that the capacity for sexual responses is present soon after conception. Now, children become aware of sex and sexuality much earlier than many people realize. They generally learn to disguise their interests rather than risk disapproval of their elders, but they still continue as small little scientists collecting data, performing their own experiments, and attending conferences. In fact, more than 50% of children will engage in some type of sexual behavior before their 13th birthday, starting as early as age 3. When they start interacting with their peers, children begin to explore their bodies together. They may masturbate or play mommy and daddy and hug and kiss and lie on top of each other. They may play doctor so they can get to look at each other's genitals. Other and social justice act author and social justice activist Letty Cotton suggests that we think of children as students rather than voyeurs. It is important for them to know what others look like in order to feel comfortable about themselves, right? So physicians and noted sexuality educated Mary Caldone stressed that children's sexual interests should never be labeled bad, but that it may be deemed inappropriate for certain times, places, or persons. According to Calderon, the attitude of the parents should be to socialize for privacy rather than to punish or forbid. If children's natural curiosity about their sexuality is satisfied, they are likely to feel comfortable with their own bodies as adults. Same-sex activity is probably more common during childhood years when the separation of the sexes is particularly strong. Must go on to develop heterosexual orientation. Some do not. Most go on to, but some do not. But whatever a person's sexual orientation, childhood sex play clearly does not create the orientation. Many gay men and lesbian women say that they first became aware of their attraction to the same sex during childhood, but many heterosexual people also report attraction to the same sex. These feelings and behaviors appear to be quite common and congruent with healthy psychological development in heterosexual, lesbian, and gay individuals. So right here is a chart. This chart exemplifies the childhood sexual behavior witnessed by at least 20% of parents by age group and gender. Pause your video and take time to look at the behavior that happens between the ages of 2 to 5, the behavior that happens between the ages of 6 to 9, and also further, the behavior that happens between the ages of 10 to 12. Childhood sexuality, ages 3 to 11. The message, if it feels good, is bad, is often internalized at an early age, leading to psychological and sexual difficulties in later life. Virtually all psychologists, physicians, child development specialists, and other professionals agree that masturbation is healthy. Negative responses from adults only magnify the guilt and anxiety that a child is taught to associate with this behavior. Children often accidentally discover that playing with their genitals is pleasurable and continue this activity until reprimanded by an adult. Male infants have been observed with erect penises a few hours before birth, a few hours after birth. A baby boy may laugh in his crib while playing with his erect penis. Baby girls sometimes move their bodies rhythmically, almost violently, appearing to experience an orgasm. By the time they are 4 or 5, children have usually learned that adults consider this form of behavior nasty. Parents generally react negatively to masturbation. Regardless of the age and the sex of the child, later this negative attitude becomes generalized to include the sexual pleasure that accompanies the behavior. Children thus learn to conceal their masturbatory play, although children vary in age at which they begin to conceal their sexuality. It appears to occur between the ages of 6 and 10. Children need to understand that pleasure from self-stimulation is normal and acceptable. But they also need to know that self-stimulation is something that we do in private, yet something that some people are still uncomfortable with. Now, when we talk about the red flags, intrusiveness, coercive, distinguishing between normal and problematic childhood sexual behaviors is a matter of degree and context of the behavior. It may be difficult for many parents and adults to recognize. When sexual behavior are persistently intrusive, coercive, developmentally abnormal, or abusive, there may be broader issues that need to be addressed. It is important at the same time to know the expression of sexuality is only one component of many factors to consider before designating a behavior as a sexual problem. If, however, sexual abuse or an emotional problem is suspected, professional help should be sought. Now, family styles have a lot to do with it. Family styles of physical expression and feelings about modesty, privacy, and nudity, they vary considerably, right? It depends on the family. So take example, 4-year-old Chantel runs naked into her parents' dinner party. She should be greeted with friendliness, not horror and harsh words. If her parents are truly uncomfortable, they can help her get dressed, matter of factly, without criminalizing the young child. Don't make her feel bad about it. That's just a kid being kid. Do not punish or humiliate a child for seeing his or her parents naked, going to the bathroom, or being sexual with each other. Now, if the parent screams or lunges for a towel, little Robbie will think he has witnessed something wicked or frightening. He can be gently reminded that mommy or daddy wants privacy at the moment. This is adult time. We could use terms like that, but don't make them feel bad for seeing you naked or even caught in a sexual act. If 9-year-old Jeremy starts routinely locking the bathroom door at 11-year-old Sarah covers her chest when a parent interrupts her while she is dressing, it is most likely a sign of normal development. Children whose privacy and modesty is respected will learn to respect that of others. All children need to be given physical affection in the form of love. Although there's no prescription for the right amount or the form of such expression, the amount, the quality affect both children's emotional well-being and the emotional and sexual health of the adults they will become. We should listen to children and trust them. Children need to know that if they are sexually abused, it is not their fault. They need to feel that they can tell someone about it and still be worthy of love. Now, all children need freely given physical affection from those they love. It sounds like a no-brainer, but depending on the family, depending on the culture, we need to hug on our kids, love on our kids. This makes them become fully functioning adults. Affection needs to be displayed. Children should be told in a non-threatening way what kind of touching by adults is acceptable and what is not acceptable. It is not necessary to frighten the child by going into great detail about the kind of bad things that others might do to them sexually. We should listen to the children and trust them, right? So these things sounds like obvious things, but you'll be surprised. Now, when we talk about puberty, okay, I remember just yesterday going through the stages of puberty. Secondary characteristics start to develop as my shoulders start to broaden and my voice start to get deeper, right? Puberty is a stage of human development when the body becomes capable of reproduction. For legal purposes, laws relating to child abuse, puberty is considered to begin at the age 12 for girls and at the age 14 for boys. Adolescence is the social and psychological state that occurs when the beginning of puberty and acceptance into full adulthood. Psychosexual development. Adolescents are sexually mature or close to it in a physical sense, but they are still learning about their gender and social roles, and they still have much to learn about their sexual scripts. They may also be struggling to understand the meaning of their sexual feelings for others and their sexual orientation. Through the mechanisms that activate the chain of development that occurs during puberty are not fully understood, researchers have observed that as the child approaches puberty, typically beginning between the ages of 8 and 13 for girls and 9 and 14 for boys, the level of hormones begin to increase. This period of rapid physical changes is triggered by the hypothalamus. Now, the hypothalamus, this plays a central role in increasing secretions that cause the pituitary gland to release large amounts of hormones into the bloodstream. The hormones called gonadotropin stimulate activity in the gonads and are chemically identical in boys and girls. In girls, they act on the ovaries. to produce estrogen. In boys, they cause the testes to increase testosterone production. These higher levels of male and female hormones result in the development of specific external signs of male and female sexual maturation, known as secondary sex characteristics, including the onset of menstruation in girls and ejaculation in boys. The first sign of puberty in girls, which occurs at an average age of about 10 and a half nowadays, is breast development. This is also the beginning of their growth spurt, which is followed by the growth of pubic and underarm hair and the onset of vaginal mucus secretions. Menarche, the onset of menstruation, follows within a year or two. The average age of menstruation is 12 years and 4 months, although girls may begin menstruating as early as 9 or as late as 17. It depends on the person, it depends on genetics, right? So this particular picture, feel free to pause it. I'm going to describe a little bit of it. If you look on the left-hand side with the maturing young lady, you will see that the acne starts to take place during the physical and hormonal changes during puberty. She develops underarm hair, breast development, round body contours. That's when women start to develop hips, right? Pubic hair, enlargement of the uterus, the clitoris, the labia, and menstruation occurs, right? So the pituitary and the adrenal glands are being affected during the stages of puberty, right? Those hormones, estrogen for women, testosterone for boys. Now, same thing happens to the male, okay? Acne, they start to develop the beard, the voice change, underarm hair, chest hair, muscle development, pubic hair, enlargement of the penis, the scrotum and the testes, and the boy now can ejaculate. Essentially, a boy now can get a young woman or a lady pregnant, right? Now, we're talking about precocious puberty, okay? We're now going to go further into sexuality in adolescence, ages 12 to 19. This is the psychosexual development. There's a term called precocious puberty. This means, and this indicates that signs of early puberty, breast and pubic hair are often present in girls. This affects African American community more often than other communities. Precocious puberty means that they are developing sooner, and oftentimes as soon as 6 to 8 years old. So for boys, the onset of early puberty could be at age 9. This is considered precocious or early puberty. This may be linked to exposure and hormones in meat and milk, but we don't know for sure, right? So just as girls often do not know what is happening when they begin to menstruate, many boys are unnerved by the first appearance of semen as a result of masturbation or nocturnal emissions during a wet dream, right? You wake up and you have semen in your underwear. Like menstruation for girls, the onset of ejaculation is a sexual milestone for boys. It is the beginning of their fertility. Alfred Kinsey called the first ejaculation the most important psychosexual event in male adolescence. Now, when parents have early and consistent conversations in an open, comfortable manner with their children, many of the risk factors associated with teen sexuality can be reduced. In fact, it is critical not only to explore the negative consequences associated with risky sexual behavior, but also positive outcomes that adolescents experience during and following sexual activity with another person. Okay? Influence of psychosexual development, of course, is going to be your family, the parental influence, peers, people that you grew up with, your siblings, the media, things that are happening on social media, television shows, the movies, and religious influences, right? A lot of religions deem any type of sexual talk to be bad, right? But studies show the more open and honest you are with your children, it can reduce the consequences of risky sexual behavior. And it can promote positive outcomes in terms of how we view sexuality. So pause again, because this right here is a chart that shows the percentage of parents who talked about sexuality with their adolescents age 15 to 18. I remember my talk about sexuality with my dad. It wasn't very smooth. It was very awkward. But nonetheless, we had that talk. Now, they're saying about 90% any topic related to sexuality, okay? 50% healthy and unhealthy relationships, 49% felt comfortable talking with son or daughter about sexuality. 42% on how to say no to sex, and 29% talked about birth control. Now, these statistics fluctuate, right? Now, take another chance to pause the video if you need a little bit more time. Figure 3 demonstrates when it comes to your teens' decisions about sexual activity, who is most influential. 38% parents, 22% friends, 9% media, 6% religious leaders and siblings, 9% teachers and educators, and 10% someone else. Just a random, right? It could be somebody you just met. We don't know. Or it could possibly be a sex ed teacher at your school, somebody like me. You never know. Now, when we talk about sexuality in adolescence, we also have to go and explore a little bit about what that means, what that looks like in the LGBTQ plus community. So during adolescence and early childhood, sexual orientation becomes a very salient issue. In fact, a lot of adolescents experience this as a trouble or anxiety-free time. Many young people experience sexual fantasies involving others of their own sex. Some engage in same-sex play. For many, these feelings of sexual attraction are a normal stage of sexual development. But for 2 to 10% of the population, the realization of a romantic attraction to members of their own sex will begin to grow. Some gay men and lesbian women report that they begin to be aware of their difference in middle or late childhood. Thus, the term questioning, right? Quote unquote, questioning is used to describe those individuals who are examining their sexual orientation during this time of life. Gay and lesbian adolescents usually have heterosexual dating experiences, and some engage in intercourse during these teen years, but they often report ambivalent feelings about them. So society in general has difficulty dealing with adolescent sexuality, accepting the fact of gay and lesbian or bisexual adolescent sexuality has been especially problematic. Although there is more understanding and acceptance of homosexuality now than in decades past, a better awareness that reforming gay people is ineffective, and more counseling and support services available in some areas for the LGBTQ plus community. Now, the assumed heterosexuality, or what some refer to as heteronormativity of society, has resulted in a collective homophobia. Homophobia is the irrational or phobic fear of gay men and lesbian women, such that the phrase, "that's so gay," right? This became a mainstream term. That's so gay. This is highly offensive. We should never use this term, right? That's so gay is part of the mainstream and youth vernacular that we are trying to eradicate that from our language. Teachers, parents, and administrators also perpetuate homophobia by ignoring and or controlling the harassment of sexual minorities, which is the LGBT community. Though there has been continued decline in anti-LGBT language over the years, middle and high school, college, and adult years. So adolescent and sexual behavior, the hormonal changes during puberty bring about a dramatic increase in sexual interest. Whether this results in sexual activity is individually determined. If children have not begun masturbating before adolescence, they likely will begin this normal activity once the hormonal and physical changes of puberty start. Masturbation is less common among women than men and more common among whites than blacks, Hispanics, or Asians. When boys reach adolescence, they no longer regard masturbation as an ambiguous play. They know that it is sexual. Data revealed that many males begin masturbating between the ages of 13 and 15, whereas among females, it occurs a little bit later, right? Gender differences may be the result of social conditioning and communication. How are we conditioned socially? How are we conditioned by the norms? Though both boys and girls may feel some guilt and shame for engaging in a behavior that their parents and others did, they come to terms with it after time. Okay. Figure 4 is a percentage of adolescents and young adults who have had some sort of sexual intercourse, and by age. You see it starts off very low, age 10, 11, 12, and then it increases with age. You start to become more comfortable with your body, start to become more confident, and oftentimes you start to have some alone time for exploring. So you see it by the age of 18, 19, 20, it goes up. Now, we also have to talk about teen pregnancy. Between the ages of 12 and 19, it's not really surprising that the vast majority, 81% of teenage pregnancy, is unplanned. 81% is unplanned. Teen pregnancies trap most of the young mothers and fathers and their children in a downward spiral of lowered expectation. This doesn't happen all the time, but a large percentage can be affected by economic hardship and poverty. Because of poor nutrition and inadequate medical care during pregnancy, babies born to teenagers have twice the normal risk of low birth weight, which is responsible for numerous physical and developmental problems. Also, many of these children will have disrupted family lives, absent fathers, and the attendant problems of poverty, such as poor diet, violent neighborhoods, limited health care, and limited access to education. They are also at higher risk for being abused than children born to older parents. Monetary costs are also high and at a premium. So this doesn't happen 100% of the time. All these statistics are saying in terms of like poor diet, violent neighborhoods, limited health care. More often than not, you can be affected by this if you are a teenage mother or father. So teenage mothers have special needs. The most pressing that can be provided for within the community are health care and education. Improving regular prenatal care are essential to monitor fetal growth and the mother's behavior, including diet, possible STIs, and possible alcohol and drug use. Babies born to young mothers are more likely to have childhood health problems and to be hospitalized than those born to older mothers. Okay, so look at the birth rates for women aged 15 to 19 in the United States from 1980 up to 2013, right? We're noticing that the birth rates, depending on the age, teenage pregnancies, it has been starting to drop. Started off high back in the 60s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, and then has slowly declined over time. And this could be due to education, right? We're just becoming more informed as people. We're making healthier decisions. So this chart right here represents the birth rates for women aged 15 to 19 by race and Hispanic origin, United States from 1991 to 2013. Pause the video and take some time to look at the stats. Okay. Now this chart right here represents the frequency of visits from non-resident fathers with children born to teen moms. 50% did not visit in the past month, whereas 10% once or twice a month, 14% a few times a month, 17% a few times a week, and 9% daily or almost daily, right? We need to get that daily and almost daily number up, right? But we're talking about teen mothers and fathers who may not be mature enough or may not be ready for this type of responsibility. So we have talked a lot about sexual education, but sexual education, it should be a lifelong process. From the time we are born, we learn about love, touch, affection, and our bodies. As we grow, the messages continue from both our families and the social environment, right? Our culture, even school-based programs complement and kind of augment these primary sources of information. This is kind of how we gather our information and become aware of it in its totality. So the developmental levels addressed by the Sexuality Information and Educational Council of the United States, some people refer to it as SICUS. Developmental labels addressed typically have to do with early childhood, sexuality, pre-adolescence, early adolescence, and adolescence, right? So as part of one of our president's teen pregnancy prevention initiative, they refer to this as the TPPI plan, the Teen Pregnancy Prevention Initiative, a plan that replaces many of the most rigid and ineffective abstinence-only programs. Abstinence means is to abstain or to not have sex at all. National organizations now provide training and technical assistance. They also work in tandem with the CDE, Center for Disease and Control and Prevention, Number one is to engage the community to address teenage pregnancy. Number two is to provide teens with evidence-based teen pregnancy prevention programs that reduce teen pregnancy and associated risk factors like STIs. Increase youth access to contraceptive and reproductive health care services. Four is to educate civic leaders, parents, and other community members about evidence-based strategies to reduce teen pregnancy and improve adolescents' reproduction health. To work with this diverse communities about the link between teen pregnancy and the social detriments of health to ensure culturally appropriate programs and reproductive health care services to the youth. Lastly, although much more research needs to be done on sexual education and its impact on young people, most professionals still agree that it is one of the most important preventative means that we have is education, talking about it, right? Openly, right? Young people guided by their parents and armed with knowledge, self-confidence, they can continue to make informed decisions and direct their own sexual destinies. All right. So we have covered a lot. Just take a minute to take it all in, review your notes. Final thoughts. We covered sexuality in infancy, adolescence, and sexual education. This has been a very informative chapter, very information heavy chapter that we covered. So by all means, go back to your notes when it's time to do your question and answer session. I hope that I have equipped you with that information. This has been chapter 6. This concludes chapter 6. This is Professor Alexander, and I will talk to everybody soon. Bye.